Live on LinkedIn. Now we are gonna probably be live in just a couple of seconds. So we might get started actually today. And it's a big pleasure to be having today Falk Altenhofer, our German guest today, to discuss some very, very interesting data, exclusive data. I must say that it's gonna be the first time that we are showing it today in a webinar on the German market focused on market trends, but also on M&A, which is a big topic now in 2026. After so many years of capital scarcity, you can say 2026 has started with a bang, with with some new deals being announced. So Falk, it's a pleasure having you today. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Pleasure of being here. Thanks for the invitation.
And of course, Falk Altenhofer, he's been involved in the cannabis industry in Europe since 2019. He's a partner at cannabis startups, helping operators raise funds and also helping companies with M&A. So it's very pertinent, the discussion that we're going to have today. Falk also has been involved in the industry in Israel and Latin America, so he has a broader perspective than just the European one. And this is why it's a big pleasure having you today. And actually, Falk, I wanted to start by asking you the big question that this image suggests, which is it true that are we on the verge of a new M&A deal in Europe and in Germany in particular? What do you think, Falk?
Definitely a big yes. I mean, when we look at the past years about the invested volume and the years we're in March, we've seen a tremendous amount of capital floating into the German of strategic investments. And let's say the Canadian and German market are a little bit under pressure. So on both sides, there's a willingness to from North America to look into Europe, to look how they can make their margin in the future.
Absolutely. It's not only the capital that has been deployed, but also the interest that is being shown into new acquisitions. So, like always, we have a lot of topics to cover today. We have a hard stop at 5 p.m. Central European Time. So, unless we have any other talks, let's go straight into the topics of today. So, essentially, first we want to start with a discussion of the main metrics in terms of importation and in terms of supply and demand that we are seeing in the German market, and also capturing the momentum towards 2026. Where do we think everything? For this, it's very relevant to also have a regulatory discussion. What's going to happen with the MedCanG reform that has been under discussion for a while. Then we're also going to look at supply metrics by origin and how this is also playing into M&A with some acquisitions by Canadian players of German distribution. And we're also going to cover some of the market dynamics that are characterizing the landscape right now in terms of pricing, products, etc. And then finally, at the end, we're going to show some of our data on M&A that we have captured in our M&A tracker by Monitor, with 60 deals in Germany that we have identified. And let's see what we can learn from those towards the future. Do you have anything to add before jumping right in, Falk?
I'm looking forward. Can't wait. Let's dive in.
Amazing. Let's do it. So, of course, the first thing that one should mention when looking at the German market in 2026 is that we are still living in the aftermath of the April 2024 reform that essentially declassified cannabis as a narcotic in Germany. And this brought a lot of facility to get prescriptions in medical cannabis. And this is what brought this surge of importation into the German market. Unlike other markets internationally that are supplied by both domestic and import production, Germany has 3 licensed growers right now, but over 90% of the supply is imported. And what we have seen after the reform, when the market was barely 30 tons of supply and about 20 tons of sellout, is that now it's 200 tons of import product and probably close to 140 or 150 tons of sellout in the market. This means that the market has essentially multiplied by 6 over the last couple of years, which is an interesting trend. However, if we look at the right side of the slide, we see that the quarterly dynamic is perhaps a little bit more nuanced. So we see that after legalization in Q3, Q2 and Q3 2024, we saw dramatic increases in the rate of importation into Germany. And as the quarters have progressed, this has been still increasing, but it has been slowing down a little bit. And even in Q4 2025, we had the first decrease in the quarterly amounts of cannabis imported, not a big decrease. We are still north of 50 tons per quarter, which would, if the trends hold, means that in 2026 we would see 230 tons imported into the country. So it's still highly dynamic, but there's this sentiment between some operators that, let's say, some level of saturation is starting to arrive in the market somehow, and that the growth trend is not going to hold as strong as during 2024 and 2025. What do you think, Falk? What's in store for 2026 in terms of German market growth?
For me, definitely the price points, how this is going to develop. We've seen in the past some investments, so certain companies have to make some money about margins. So, and I've seen definitely a trend about new segments coming up. So, because right now the market of, let's say, all the flower smokers, the weed is here in Germany. It arrived, and now is the question how to capture new segments out of this. So we're talking about high quality flowers and different dosage forms, which isn't placed here, but I think this is a clear statistic that the market is here, and it came to an end of importation, I think.
Okay, I hope we can delve a little bit into more detail in those topics later today. So how we can avoid a little bit of the commoditization that's starting to happen in the German flower market. But first, let's look into the three deals that have actually shaped the conversation for M&A in Europe. Because after so many years of a certain capital scarcity, over the last 6 months, we had three big deals announced in European cannabis that have, they are very distinct, but at the same time, they show a renewed appetite for European acquisitions, always by North American operators and specifically by Canadian ones. So the first one, in which you were very involved because you recently did a webinar with the Remexian guys, was the High Tide by Remexian acquisition. High Tide is the largest retailer in Canada with over 200 dispensaries, and they acquired Remexian, which was the fastest growing distributor in Germany. Before legalization, it wasn't one of the top distributors, but after legalization, they started bringing a lot of new SKUs into the market, and this strategy played out very well, and they increased their distribution and import substantially, and they got acquired by High Tide. Yeah. Then later in December, we had this acquisition in the Netherlands, but I believe is also relevant because it was probably the first big recreational acquisition in the European history. So adult use, which only a few years ago seemed like something from the future, is now starting to also attract capital in Europe. Kronos, which is a large grower and licensed producer in Canada, acquired Canadelar, which is also a grower, one of the 10 licensed growers, and actually the largest licensed grower in the Dutch experiment. But of course, only the 10 growers in the experiment can supply this pilot project. So it's not only a play about securing capacity, it's also about market access, so positioning themselves into the Dutch experiment, which has a lot of momentum with over 70 coffee shops that can get products only from these 10 licensed growers. And then finally, the largest deals of them all was announced only a few weeks ago, and this was Organigram, which is also now one of the largest LPs in Canada, with investment by a big tobacco company. They had also been doing some M&A in Canada, like the acquisition of Motive Labs at the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025. And they already had a 9% stake in Sanity Group, which is one of the top distributors in the German market. And now they decided to increase this stake for as much as 250 million, even though half of this is an earnout based on the EBITDA and the revenues of the next 2 years. So the upfront consideration was still 113 million, which is one of the highest that we have seen in Europe, particularly in the last few years. And what we see is these 3 deals, they all have the same thing in mind, which is market access in Europe, but still the deals are structured in completely different ways, and they have, let's say, different strategic rationales. So Falk, what's your view on that, and why do you think the 3 deals, particularly if we look at the EBITDA multiples, why do you think they are priced so differently, these 3 companies?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Remexian was and will be always a wholesaler, so they're just buying cannabis and selling it. So their innovation is not that big. Cannaralt is the investment was always to become to create a premium company, a premium brand out of it. And the deal with Organigram into Sanity always was very actively creating certain different models in different countries itself. So the need was always, or the factor was always different. So you can't compare those three. Sanity definitely, where heating is creating certain market access business models to really which is the brand in front of the patient to create this demand. And so every deal you have to look very differently, and also of the buyer and their strategic in mind. But we can definitely say that this is quite interesting for all the German companies right now, because the window is open and everybody is dressing their company very well to be ready to get acquired or to accomplish certain strategic steps to be ready for this year, especially when the regulation of the law don't come, nobody knows, but the window is there.
Yeah, so it's a good moment now for the acquisitions, because there's this the dust has settled a little bit after legalization, I would say, but still it's not entirely clear what would happen with the MedCanG amendment, which we'll discuss later. What I would mention in terms of the wide EBITDA spread is that probably acquirers are considering the optionality that they get depending on regulatory reforms in different European countries. And what I mean with this is that both the High Tide and with Remexian and the Kronos per Canadelar, they have the revenue is more or less capped, let's say, by the scheme that they are included in. So Remexian depends on the success of the medical market in Germany, of course, which has a lot of potential, but still it has a certain ceiling. And even more so, I would say, for the Dutch pilot project, because it's only going to be in these 10 municipalities, 70 coffee shops that they are going to be able to sell, no exportation, no diversification into other lanes. Whereas in the case of Sanity Group, you see that they have exposure into the Swiss pilot projects, with one in Basel. And also this might evolve, and it's going to be discussed this summer in Switzerland, whether recreational legalization at the national level is going to be implemented, which could be as early as 2029. And therefore, Sanity would be a first mover in that market. And also, I must say, even though the pilot projects have been paused for the time being in Germany, they also have exposure into that. And now they are also even saying that they want to expand into the UK and Poland. And also other German players are also looking into this international expansion over the last quarters. Do you agree with this sentiment, Falk, or is there something else that you think is playing into the valuations?
No, it's a strategic step. I mean, Sanity Group is maybe the one which is very clear here. They have to until really they get the money on the bank account of Organigram. They really have to grow, in my point of view, unorganically. So they have to acquire another company here in Germany in order to fulfill those goals. And as you said, I mean, there's a cap, and every business model you have to look very different from a different angle on it. Yeah.
Mhm. Amazing. So before we move into more detailed discussion of the current landscape, I wanted to also get a more historic view of how the M&A and funding landscape for German cannabis companies has evolved over the last decade, essentially. And what we see is that 2026, even though we're only in the beginning of March, is already being a little bit of an outlier compared to the previous years. So we saw that at the beginning, of course, Germany enacted a very limited legalization in 2013, but the actual medical market only started developing after 2018, more or less. And this attracted a first wave of capital, mostly focused on Canadian, well capitalized Canadian companies, which were publicly trading at their maximums at the time. And they deployed some capital. For instance, Aurora acquired Pedanios in Germany, Canopy acquired Stores and Bickel, and a few other moves, big acquisitions of German companies that were well positioned. This then had a little bit of a lull in 2020, and the landscape after COVID, with COVID recovery funds available and so on, changed a little bit. And what we saw was actually a lot of equity raises by established players in Germany, and this includes many of the distributors that managed to do some equity raises with VC funds and similar companies. But after 2023, the capital markets really slowed down, I would say, in Germany and pretty much in the whole of Europe, and even you could say in North America, with only about 50 million of investment over the last 3 years. And now 2026, this has shifted significantly. Of course, we are mostly reflecting here the Sanity acquisition, which is a big one. But again, we are only at the beginning of the year. I must add a little caveat, which is that the 60 deals that we have considered here, which are from our M&A tracker, that you can ask me to get access there. These are only the public transactions, of course. So everything that happened that wasn't announced is not reflected here, but it still paints a good picture. And this is like 1.1 billion euros invested over the German cannabis market over the last decade, more or less. So in terms of the M&A perspective, Falk, like how you started in 2019 and you have helped so many companies. So how have you seen this landscape evolve? Now we're seeing, for instance, with this 25 million by Enua that they managed to get in debt from Deutsche Bank, we are starting to see even some possibilities to access debt easier than a few years ago. So what are some trends that we should keep in mind this year, Falk?
Yeah, I mean, you see in the past there have been in the past 3 years there have been a lot of acquisitions strategically. You have to have money in this industry, and debt is of course a super interesting vehicle right now in this very capital intensive business model of buying cannabis and selling it here, which means, I mean, you can say that most of the time a certain percentage has to get paid upfront right now, a certain percentage after it gets, let's say, processed with different steps. And there's, of course, a goal of paying. Which takes sometimes up to 60 days and more. So you have to have the money on your bank account, And that's actually the most interesting one, that a pharmaceutical company of dealing with cannabis was able to convince the Deutsche Bank to get a credit line here. And this is, yeah, I think there are a lot of companies who are currently talking to their bank to make something happen here. And but of course, a bank always is looking for a safety net. And so this is really about stakeholders of how to strategically approaching a bank.
It shows some legitimacy by the sector. This could be even further developed with some developments in, of course, the US with the executive order by Trump, which might lead eventually, not immediately, but to safe banking reform, which would grant North American operations easier access to capital, to credit lines and such, which this might trickle down into Europe as well, I would say. Something
Correct.
else that I wanted to discuss here, and let me know your opinion, Falk, is in terms of the type of companies that are getting acquired or that are the targets. Is like, of course, 10 years ago, there were very few revenue generating companies in Europe and in Germany, in the German medical market.
Yeah.
So all the plays were slightly more speculative, or let's say companies that were diversified and had a cannabis arm. Those were the main targets for acquisitions, with few exceptions like stores and vehicles, which of course the vaporizers were already selling good, but most of the companies were very small.
Yeah.
I would say this more, let's say, speculative or future upside driven acquisition landscape has now shifted, and now most of the acquirers are securing actual market access, so they really care about the revenue metrics, margin statistics, and so on, unlike a few years ago. Do you agree with this view?
Yeah, I mean, how long we have an let's say a normal market, and now it's with the upcoming deregulation, maybe we just had a window of really saying, okay, when doing an acquisition, what was the past, and how big is the window we are looking at. And we've seen at, for example, Sanity, a big driver was only Q4 last year on terms of revenue. So there's no track record, or where you always have the same numbers, because the market is not that old. And this is actually the most important thing to consider. What is the goal of the strategic investor, and what numbers they're really looking and where they're interested in. And then it's just a deal, how to make the deal done. And there's a reason for example, the Maxen that High Tide only acquired 51%, because they have different goals. Everybody has their goals, so it's not like that you sold the company and bye-bye. It's more of, hey, yeah, you have a joint venture, you have a strategic investor, and now the show starts. As always.
Interesting. So there's still some volatility, let's say, into the situation, and of course, a big part that's playing into that is the regulatory situation, because even though reform passed in April 2024, it was disputed since the beginning by the parties that were not in the government at the time. But then the election happened, and now the CDU, Conservative Party in Germany, is in power. And since the beginning, the health minister, Nina Walker, was very much for the repeal of the CanG. And there was this MedCanG amendment that went through successive parliamentary processes. And right now it's expected over the next few months that it will be voted. And I must say, from not a German perspective, but from outside, it seems like it's still fairly volatile, because let's say the industry has put a lot of effort into lobbying the CDU. There's many of the CEOs of the cannabis companies that are actually members of the CDU and have done activities to manage to convince the CDU that actually, even from a perspective of criminal law and public order and access to cannabis on the illicit market, it can be very bad if we repeal all this legislation. But then you see you see this permanent tension, let's say, even within the CDU, that makes it, you would think that there will be a transactional conclusion, that you will have some constraints on prescriptions, but not the full repeal that was announced a while back. But it's still, from my point of view, it still seems a little bit up in the air. So, Fal, what are some keys there into the MedCanG reform? I know you've been working with Gunnar Kuke, which is a lawyer firm in Germany, that has been keeping track of that in detail. So far, what are some drivers there? And if you had to guess, what do you think will happen with the MedCanG amendment?
Not so much, actually. I think we come out. There was a reading almost 2 weeks ago, and it says that we have to have a present meeting with the doctor in person, and number two prescription, the third prescription, and the fourth prescription within 1 year. It can get by a telemedicine, and then it has to start again over. So the fifth prescription has to be in person. I think this is going to be the goal. It, as everybody knows, we still have to act under the European umbrella. So Germany can't do their own laws how they wanted to have it. And for the future, you have to have an access, or the patients have to have access to the products. So we're going to have a normal of the pharmacies that every pharmacy can send it via the post. This is not going to change. And yeah, I think there will be not a big change. Let's see how the details looks like. And in spring, we will have probably in 2 months a final decision here.
So your
If
prediction
everything
is
was
that
fine.
your prediction is that the first prescription is going to be in person, but then
Of a doctor, yes.
telemedicine is going to remain open, and maybe things that were discussed for a while about local German doctors not being able to do telemedicine, but foreign doctors being able to, which is completely ridiculous. You think this
Yes.
is going to get dropped?
Yeah, because we are always with the European Union under the umbrella. I mean, and when the first doctor is sitting in Germany and it has to be in person, then, but this is just a discussion, an ongoing discussion. I really don't have a crystal ball, and it's very tough to see it. It's the same with the pilot projects of the European Union to just switch. None of them got accepted yet. So let's really see how this will end here, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you actually about the pilot projects, because
Yeah.
they were a big part, the second pillar of legalization as intended by the last government. But
Yeah.
even under the Kanji, there was this clause allowing for research, investigation, etc., that some companies try to put forward pilot projects through those, but the Federal Office for Food struck them down. So now there seems that pilot projects are not moving ahead in Germany for the foreseeable future. But Falk, do you think the optionality to recover these pilot projects, maybe with the next government, is still open? Do you think the having recreational access, even if just experimental and slow, is going to be possible in Germany at some point?
I mean, that was very a political willingness to make the MedCanG even possible, and I would love to say yes, but I don't think so. It's maybe my own person. It's really I don't really think. And if I talk to others, they have the same. The idea is wonderful. As I said, we're still under European Union, and it's very hard. And that the ministry will even push into it will take a lot of no. it's too weak to accept it. The risk is too high on every sense. It's better to really change a little bit Metkangi on the medical part and finding the common sense on every political power and yeah,
Mhm.
get it done because of course, as everywhere in the world, um, every government is very busy with other topics.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then finally, I would also like to get your perspective on the club situation and let's say broader decriminalization, like home growing, sale of seeds, sale of clones. We have also seen a lot of judicial back and forth regarding the legality of these practices in some states, in particular, like in Bavaria with the clones. The clubs, in principle, they were some projections assume that there would be thousands of clubs in the country, which would be required to meet the demand for sure, because they are very small clubs with a maximum of 500 members. However, we have seen only about 500 clubs licensed and a little bit north of 100 clubs that are actually in operation right now. They're having problems in some states and municipalities to move ahead with these projects. So, what's your view on the clubs and on the home growing? Do you think it's going to get more curtailed, or is there still room to develop solid business models in these segments?
Yeah, I read about 500 granted licenses as well. Let's say they're a little bit less, and half of them are active, like not 100, like 250 roughly.
Mhm.
It, it's very hard to compete on the, let's say, on the Canadian cannabis because the price points are very low. What currently medical patients are paying as a self-payer. So I really believe that, of course, the only chance is to have like a craft beer brewery if I want to make this comparison. And but those clubs, for example, one club is very close of from my place, only 1 kilometer. They have 500 members, crazy good profits, and it's local grown wheat. And I think if a club, it's the cap is 500, that's easily possible. Not like in the woods, but on even smaller cities. So I think this is actually the great profit maker here. And
Mhm.
step by step, I've seen starting in last autumn, more and more clubs are getting granted, and more entrepreneurs are going into this space because yeah, it works, and it's good to have only a small, profitable piece of the cake rather than trying to get the biggest piece.
Interesting. But there's so many companies that are also interested into the bigger piece. And as you say, the Canadian competition in terms of
Yeah.
product, no, is difficult, let's say, to match the price and the quality of what can be imported, no, with local supply. So I wanted to discuss a little bit on where the products are coming from and some trends in terms of the supply into Germany. Like we said before, the national production is very small. There's three licensed growers, which are now expanding capacity, like both Demecan and Aurora announced expansion of their capacity, but they're still under 10 tons, let's say, of annual production. So over 90% is imported. And we see that historically, Canadian production has been about half of what was supplied. Um, and what we saw after legalization was actually a big rise of Portugal as a processing country for mostly imported GACP products that then get turned into GMP in Portugal and then re-exported into Germany. And we see that from 20% share, more or less, before legalization, it increased up to one third of the products were coming from Portugal. But then I must say, in the middle of 2025, some supply chain disruptions affected this dynamic. And this included, for instance, the exhaustion of the INCB quota, which was set at 192 tons last year, which in the end there was over 200 tons of imports. But this affected, there were an import permits for a few weeks. And also, changes in the compliance regime in Portugal because Infarmed tightened the documentation requirement for producers. And this also brought a deceleration towards the end of 2025 of Portuguese supply. And this has been replicated recently, we can say, for instance, in Macedonia, with a recent investigation on licensed producers that can also put strain on the compliance regime for products coming from Macedonia. So the result of this has been that towards the end of 2025, Portuguese production has went down from the one third to about one fifth of the products, and this has been alternative processing countries in Europe like Czechia and Malta have taken a lot of that slack from Portuguese processors, and we are seeing them increase vigorously right now in their share of supply to the German market. And also, we must say, in the last quarter, in particular of 2025, we saw an increase of the rest of the world, not from Europe, not from North America, but more like Australian production, South African production, and Colombian production. Thai production is still not there, but we're going to see it pretty soon as well. So this has been talked for many, many years as well, that whether low-cost production from all around the world could disrupt the German supply chain. And it's only now that we are starting to see this at scale, with these producers now accounting for one tenth of all the products that are going into Germany. Another angle that is the one I wanna answer you, I wanna ask you about, Falk, is the share of Canadian supply, because most international markets like Australia or Israel, they have like 90% of their products that are imported come from Canada, whereas Germany has a little bit of a more diversified sourcing of products, but still Canadians are really looking into the German market, like we have seen with some of the acquisitions, and some of the M&A moves might also have to do with the necessity to acquire market access and supply, like we saw with High Tide and Remexian. So, Fal, what's your perspective? Do you think that other Canadian players are going to be looking at entering Germany through acquisitions? And what do you think this will mean for the future of supply? Do you think Canadian supply will increase? Do you think it's going to be German-grown products from elsewhere in Europe, products from all around the world? What do you think, Falk?
Always the price point. Just to give you a full number, the number is from last month. The average price of a self-payer buying a gram of cannabis was €5.20. So, and when we look at Canada, all the investments into grow facility, I mean, Canada is like 5-7 years ahead, something like this. All their grown cannabis has to go somewhere. And if the margin is not there in the local market, of course, the grower is looking into other markets. And Germany, as with 80 million people, there is a huge buying power. And until now, everybody was looking for flowers in general. And as you said at the beginning slide, that has slowing down a bit. And now I hope it's not the race in the button, because the button is already a little bit there. But I always say it's a commodity. There's always somebody who have or must or want to sell it cheaper because of certain goals. And this is actually the reason why we've seen a lot of M&A right now, because it is very correlated to the price point. And when certain importers here in Germany brought their flowers on a too high price, they have a problem right now. So they're looking to get acquired. And to your other question, if Canadians are coming, I think the best way is as a grower to just sell their flowers to somebody and not to have and with a clear contract, and don't need to acquire a certain company, because it's always takes risk. But I think there's no other way in the future of being vertical integrated and to have also a running business model of acquiring those customers as well. telemedicine, delivery, like all those extra services to separate yourself in terms of positioning of the competition. And
Interesting.
yeah, and how the future will look like. Thailand, we've seen it. South America, as you said, there's always air and space that the price will even get a little bit lower. And what's very interesting right now is with the energy crisis we're currently coming in, and as everybody knows, it's a lot of indoor grown in Canada, so you need to have a lot of energy. And I'm looking forward how Colombia and Thailand are playing this card. And in terms of that will give a little bit dynamic.
So, do you think now the energy crisis might affect the perspectives for production in Germany or in nearby countries that are more exposed, that they need this natural gas, or and they might see the energy prices increase too much for them? You think this reduces their competitiveness?
I mean, the biggest cost is always the energy in the growth. So if this, I don't know how the local in Canada will, how much they're buying their energy. But if you look at the barrel price, yeah, they will feel it. And yeah, let's see how, as I said, countries like Colombia or Thailand with a lot of sun are playing this card. Let's see. Let's see.
Absolutely. And you touch on very interesting topic on the sorry, on the commoditization of flower supply into Germany.
Yes.
Something that we might point here, for instance, when you compare Germany, which is the largest federal market in the world outside North America, you compare it with Australia, which is the second. In Australia, you have a lot more variety of product formats available for patients because it's a finished good regime, so the pharmacy doesn't need to compound the final dosage form, and also the rules are a little bit more lenient in terms of allowing the importation of babes and edibles and this type of products. Whereas the German market, particularly after legalization, has been very much focused on the flower. And this is particularly true of the self-paying segment, which used to be about half of the market, but after legalization, its dramatic increase has brought it to more like 80% of the whole market. Whereas then the segment of the market that is reimbursed, which is what we are seeing in this slide, it has a little bit more of extracts, let's say. This used to be historically dronabinol that used to be compounded into different products at the pharmacy. Over the last few years, we've seen that dronabinol has also seen price compression and also has seen competition from full spectrum extracts, also to be compounded in the pharmacy. But still, we have seen, despite the difficulties, let's say, to bring these more advanced dosage forms into Germany, we have seen some developments there. I must point, for instance, with medical devices, 2 new CE certified medical devices becoming approved over the last few months, one by Curaleaf, the other by Somai. We might also point out that edibles, even though they are not big in the German market yet, like they are in Australia or in the US, but we have seen some launches by Wico and Symbiotic, also Demecan launching extract tubes into the market. We have also seen some attempts at marketing the babes, and all this essentially can counter a little bit of this commoditization and falling prices for the flower. Do you agree with this, Falk? And do you think we are going to see a lot more product and format innovation in the German market during 2026?
I hope so. And the biggest challenge is the pharmacist, who is actually the innovator for the patient. That is a law topic, but for sure, flowers are still going to be the hidden. But when you look even at the Canadian market, there's not real growth on flowers, only at edibles and vapes. Maybe this is attached to some other segments, like older people who are not used to smoke or something. But for sure, the self payer is the majority of the market, and this is very price. This is a price and high THC. This makes, I would say, more than 90%, because not everybody is reporting their numbers. So yeah, so it's the GKV is like 5-10% maximum.
Mhm.
And this is I hope there's some more product innovation, and yeah, let's see. This is going to be the most important year this year in terms of product innovation.
Let's see. Also seeing a lot of, well, some solventless offerings also being developed, like Demecan has now some rosin into the market.
That's why,
Other
yeah,
are some new types of extracts, like the one by Becanex, or even
good
the,
point. Yeah,
yeah. So we're seeing, I think, not only commoditized extracts, distillate based, that were dominating international markets. We are slowly seeing a little bit more advanced products, I would say, and this is exciting because you can probably retain more margins as well than compared to the flour. So the future might be more into these more advanced manufacturing dosage forms, and they might also be manufactured in Germany. Um, Offering also more opportunities to vertically integrate for
we have
producers.
the companies for this, for sure, to develop this kind of. I mean, Germany is a farmer country, has been
Absolutely, we must.
there, and sorry.
Yeah, we must also point out the botanical clinical trial that also showed the results a few months ago. That was an exciting one because, of course, what we now are showing with pharma, it's only Epidiolex, Sativex, and a couple of unlicensed unlicensed products. And now we might have a new approved product for chronic pain, which would be very, very exciting. And it's a German company, Botanical, that's developing
Correct,
that. This
correct.
might have also global effects, not just in Germany.
Yes, and just a very important note, when something with the telemid is seen, how it's going to change for the current patient journey. When you look at the market, for example, in Poland, which you can compare a little bit, the prescribing dropped by 50%. I even think that it's going to be more. So then we having a new market again as well, and we have to start from data and etc. From zero again in
Yeah,
terms of valuation,
absolutely.
etc. Yeah,
And some players are better positioned than others, I guess. More positioned for the more pharma-like market, like the reimburse, and not so much the telemedicine, like we saw in Poland. Even though I must say, Poland in 2025, they recovered the sales levels of 2024, even after the telemedicine ban, with some adaptation measures like sending doctors, one day to different cities.
caravan.
The Canopy did this driving around with the van giving
Yeah,
prescriptions as well. I'm not sure this model will stick, but it shows that there's a future after telemedicine restriction, let's say.
if there's a willingness, there's a way. Yeah,
Absolutely. And actually, for our last slide before going into the Q&A, make sure, guys, to type your questions so we can answer them right after this slide. But first, I wanted to look into the different business models that are trending, and that are attracting investment in the German market. What we see is, over the last decade, distribution has focused most of the efforts, particularly if we include as well brand and multi-segment, which is mostly investments into market access. So production can take place in Canada, perhaps, but the retail, the distribution, the retail, and the sale to customers is the segment that really dominates in the German market. However, I must say, in terms of the evolution, uh, early on, there were more plays around distribution, like I said, with Canadian players securing their own players in Germany, like Aurora, Canopy, etc., etc. And in recent years, perhaps there's been more focus on brands or in multi-segment, like the Sanity deal that gets you optionality into different segments of the industry. So, from your perspective, Falk, what do you expect? Which type of companies do you expect attracting more attention in 2026?
When from a statistical point of view, definitely the distributors. I mean, Canadian companies or Colombian companies, they have to secure the distribution, and so it will be under the on that segment. Of course, here and there, somebody is trying to produce cannabis or wants to come up with a new brand or um, with a new patient journey tech company or even going into brand, but with the upcoming might change in regulation, everybody is in a little bit of wait and hold and just want to secure their distribution. But we should look at this in a couple of months when we have a new regulating update from the
Mhm.
government again.
Yeah, absolutely. We must say though that production investment, even though many people are saying that no, Germany will keep importing, but it's still been ramping up fairly. Not only the investment rounds by Demecan, but even last year, a new grower got 10 million in investment to grow a facility in Germany. I know there's a couple of projects, but still, you believe that it's going to be market access that will continue to amass the attention in the sector, probably.
Percentage wise, for sure. Yes. I just hope because it's more exciting looking at companies with tech and brands because this is where the margin is and not about making a process more efficient. That's not so exciting, but that's most of the time the biggest amount of money, let's say.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, very interesting. So these were all the questions that all the presentation that we had prepared today. But I'm seeing that there was a little bit of discussion in the chat as well. So in the last 5 minutes that we have, let's try to answer a few of those questions. The first one is by Jairo, and he's asking whether regulatory developments in France will somehow affect the German market. We must say here that France and Germany are taking very separate regulatory approaches. So, for instance, France, there will be no flower. There is marketing authorization required for every registered product. So it's, let's say, more traditionally pharma market. Do you think this can inspire something in Germany as well, Falk, or not quite?
No, short answer, no.
They are going to stay
It's
distinct,
a
no?
total, as you said, it's a totally different approach of regulating. It's a total different market segments in France. The current companies are tackling, and the majority of this market here in Germany is flour, and it's not going to be in France. So it will be very hard to compare or to even have an influence. So it's just better to say I don't think so. Of course, those two countries are the biggest in Germany, in Europe,
Yeah.
and their exchanges, and everybody's looking at the other side. But I don't think that it will have an influence. Yeah, maybe some innovation got paid and in France, so there will be a cross in terms of vapes or something. But maybe, but on product innovation, but not on the regulation. No, no.
Interesting. I must also make this question extensible to the UK because, of course, Germany is mostly a magistral market with pharmacy compounding. The UK is finished product market, so easier perhaps for product innovation. Now the UK is seeing a lot of attention this year. So how do you think the relationship between developments in Germany and the UK is going to play out, Falk?
How do, I wouldn't consider myself as an UK expert. I just seen the numbers; they are not that big on the growth. When you look at the total market, the growth rates are just crazy in Germany. It's a higher population, and yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, yeah, I wouldn't
yeah, it's
call my opinion as that
no
valuable.
worries. No worries. I believe UK imported last year between 20 and 25 tons, so it's about a tenth of the German market. However, some players are interested first because English-speaking market, so maybe some US brands can translate easier into the UK compared to Germany. And also in terms of margins and the ability to hold a little bit of higher prices, some companies are prefer the UK for that reason. But I agree with you that Germany is set to remain the epicenter of the European cannabis market for at least a few years.
Yes.
Um, yeah, you clearly have an advantage. Um, so let's move to another question. Daniel is mentioning petrol prices in Canada, mentioning that it has also increased. It's 152 in Toronto today compared to 122 weeks ago. So maybe the energy crisis is not only, I mean, we are very exposed to the Middle East, you could say, but even all around the
Yeah.
world, this could also have an
So
impact.
same. All right. Cool. Yeah.
Mhm. Then Daniel is also mentioning that in his research, young people who live at home because high housing costs are high prefer vapes and edibles because it doesn't smell, so their parents don't get angry. It's interesting comment, and some people agree with that. And then Mark Merritt, who is an investor on Canadian cannabis, is asking for what are the factors that are gatekeeping the access to vapes and to other products. Do you have a perspective on that, Falk? On like what might be required so that the vape supply or the edible supply expand in the German market?
I mean, we have to separate vapes and edibles. Let's stick on vapes and on the current. Yeah, for example, of Somai, a lot of is this a very a medical device or not? It's just like making homework, getting the right experts at the table, and then starting the process. This is possible also it's on a scaling perspective. The edibles will be a little bit tougher, but yeah, money will and time
And the way.
will bring it out. But right now, the flower market was just too good, and to just give give people, the self payers, the cannabis flowers they want, and it was very easy to process. And why of looking right and left into other categories, other dosage forms? Yeah.
Interesting. So let's do our last question today before finishing. And Anthony Carrigan is asking for German patients whether they feel the difference between the origins of products. So whether they can notice the difference between Canadian products and Colombian products, and if this impacts the buying decision of German patients. What do you think, Falk?
German patients are not that good educated yet. They can't see a difference. They only make a comparison to their flowers from the black market. And usually the medical flowers are better. But step by step, the more time passes by, of course, a patient will notice a certain different size of the buds, and but the pricing making this possible in the future, because German uh, patients are very educated on prices. We are always the cheapest country on groceries, on other topics. So we are very, very price sensitive. So creating good quality flowers in the future on a good price point is definitely a road.
And do you believe that patients are looking at the origin of the products to source them, or they don't really mind? They only care about price and quality, irrespective of the origin?
I don't think they're paying so much attention to it. I mean, no, the price point and maybe the name is more important. But I haven't have made a eye tracking test yet if they're really paying attention. But this
Amazing.
is
Okay, we have you are closing in on 5 p.m., so we're gonna leave it here. Thank you so much, Falk, for all your insights. I hope this was interesting. Feel free to message us on the DMs with any other question that you have, and also share this video so more people can see our latest data on M&A in Germany and Europe. Let's keep it going, guys. 2026 may be a big year for European cannabis.
thank you,
Thank you,
Arno.
Falk.
Thank you, Arno, for the invitation.